The other question is going to be mainly, and this is just off the top of my head, cultural studies. The importance of cultural studies right now. Why is it that in the late 80s and early 90s we have the emergence of this new discipline and the different kind of intellectual traditions that make up this new discipline as well?
I think, right, I think it's not accidental that postmodern theory and cultural studies both emerged in the 1980s as widespread models for the analysis of popular culture. It's precisely the proliferation of forms of popular culture, of the images of popular culture, the increased popularity of film, of popular music, of television, of any number of forms of culture in the 1980s that the postmodernists have been describing that makes it imperative to study academically and to valorize politically these different forms of culture. There has also been, and this is another postmodern point, an erosion of the distinction between high and low culture, so-called, in the academy, that English departments are no longer just teaching English and the canon and the great works, but are also looking at alternative, marginal literatures, excluded voices, different types of oppositional literature and text, and the forms of popular culture. Now, cultural studies, as it developed in England in the Birmingham School, made this broad range of popular culture the terrain of study. From the beginning, they attacked the distinction between high and low culture. They valorized the importance of popular culture in people's lives and for left political projects in the way that I discussed earlier. Moreover, they gave critical methods of analyzing popular culture, ideology critique, Freudian symbol criticism, feminism as a perspective and critical method for analyzing popular culture that are of extreme importance today. So cultural studies, both as sort of a project of study as it developed in England as a methodology to criticize and analyze popular culture, and popular cultural studies as a political project involved with critiques and analyses of the hegemonic, the dominant forms of culture in a society that also studied the marginal subcultures, the cultures of resistance that would form the possibility of what Gramsci called a counter-hegemony, strikes me also as an extremely important political intervention within the field of the study of popular culture. Indeed, this obviously connects with what I was talking about earlier, the need to have alternative cultural and political interventions as well as just cultural analyses. And so therefore I think the cultural studies offers a very productive political project. Now, what I'm worried about in terms of the appropriation of cultural studies, particularly in the United States, I can't speak for Canada, although one could imagine that this could also be a problem here, and that is a depoliticized version of cultural studies, where in the academy, in the universities in the United States, they're perfectly willing today to study any form of popular culture, to have cultural studies programs that mostly, by the way, get into English departments and use the forms of literary criticism to study television, film, popular music, etc. And they may even be willing to use Marxist ideology, critique, structuralism, post-structuralism, psychoanalysis, but they abstract the study of culture from this political project that was part of the Birmingham School of British Cultural Studies, and basically they're eliminating Gramsci from the field of cultural studies because it was Gramsci who analyzed culture in terms of a theory of hegemony, the ways that forms of popular culture produced the hegemony of a given class, group, or sex or race in a given society, that was also concerned with counter-hegemony, with oppositional forms of culture that would produce social alternatives and social transformation. There's a real danger that this type of political project and analysis and critique will be erased from the field of cultural studies as it's institutionalized in the United States and perhaps Canada, which now brings us to where we are, and that is the Popular Culture Conference. In this sense, cultural studies sort of defanged of its political project is no different, or is little different, let us say, than the kinds of studies of popular culture by the Popular Culture Association, which is willing to study each and every and any form of popular culture to make it an academically respectable discipline. And this is the positive moment of the popular cultural tradition here. This PCA convention has been an important force in intervening within American academic scenes to make the study of popular culture viable. But there's a serious problem in their approach to popular culture, and that is it tends, in many of its practitioners, to be too empiricist and too anti or even hostile to theory, where it just simply describes and even celebrates the forms of popular culture, be it quilting or comic books or horror films or popular literature or whatever, that these things are viewed uncritically. Now, the cultural studies, even in its depoliticized form, will be more theoretical than the popular culture tradition of the PCA. So in that sense, even a depoliticized cultural studies in the U.S. or Canada would be an advancement in terms of the theoretical and critical project over the PCA. But both a depoliticized cultural studies and the sort of often apolitical Popular Culture Association approach will lose out on this political project that British cultural studies was initially involved in, and thus would be a regression behind that model. So if I had to valorize any sort of approach to popular culture, I guess it would be the Gramscian approach as was incorporated in the British popular culture, British cultural studies tradition. On the other hand, in terms of describing my own work, I would describe it as more eclectic than following any particular line, be it the critical theorist, be it Gramsci, be it the Birmingham School. For instance, my book, Camera Politica, that I co-authored with Michael Ryan, was a study of Hollywood film from the 1960s to the present that was relating the major trends and tendencies and blockbusters of Hollywood film to the new social movements, to the political struggle in the United States, to the historical issues and turmoils of the time. The project was to combine the sort of historical materialist approach to history with the Frankfurt approach to ideology critique, to feminism, post-structuralism, and the new critical methods that are being developed to show how one could use all of these different methods, different schools to analyze popular culture. And this is the position I would take today, that ultimately a multi-perspectival approach to popular culture is the richest. Any single take on popular culture is going to have, as Paul de Man would say, its blindness and its insight. That doing a pure feminist reading is going to really illuminate gender. Doing a psychoanalytic reading is going to illuminate certain aspects of the unconscious and sexuality and other topics that psychoanalysis is good at. Doing a Marxist ideology critique is going to illuminate other things. But each one of these methods taken in and of itself will have its limitations, its blindnesses, and that to do a more multidimensional mode of cultural analysis and critique, you need a variety of methods. Now, this doesn't necessarily lead to pluralism and eclecticism, because different projects, analyzing different texts or having different sorts of ideals or goals or projects would require using different of these theories and excluding other ones.